Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to The Object of the Game. I'm Maureen Kyle with Coach Chuck Kyle. And today, if you are a football fan, then you need to be watching this episode because we are going to delve into some NFL history and from a guest that has witnessed NFL history first person. Some of the big names we're going to throw out here will just floor you. But Dad, I want you to talk about as we were talking about possible guests for this show, you're talking about Bill Curry because you guys are on a committee together with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, our friends down in Canton.
Right. I mean, we're our committee is the National High School Council through the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Basically, what we're trying to do there's the initiative is send inspirational messages to all high school football players each day during the regular football season, honor our Hall of Fame enshrinees in their high schools with plaques and dedications, using their quotes, if we can, to get out to these players. And yes, there's going to be a football classic from various teams that have players in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. So that's what's coming up. But a very important part of it is a character element, that these Hall of Fame players still have something to tell the young kids coming up. And Bill Curry is on the committee along with Pete, and that you'll meet. And I think you'll see right away such wisdom is going to come from Bill. And he was in the first Super Bowl, the first one. And as a player, he was in the third one and the fifth one as years go by. He was the center for Bart Starr, Johnny Unitas, coached by Vince Lombardi and Don Shula and all the people he meets. And he wrote this book. It is 10 Men You Meet in the Huddle. Great read, folks. Great read. You'd love it.
I want to ask, because you're going to talk about the book as we talk to Bill and to Pete, a close friend that played for him as well. But when you read that book, what was it that stood out to you about Bill's character? As you're talking about character, but Bill Curry's character.
Just a humble determination. I mean, he was drafted, ready, back then, 20th round. He was still a junior. They had some special program like that. 20th round. I don't think even if you're 7th now, are you going to make the team or not? But he had his chance, right? And he goes, and just his work ethic and just his determination. He was a 6'3", 215-pound center coming out of Georgia Tech. And he has this great career in 3 Super Bowls, was all-pro, I think 2 or 3 years. Goes on to coach in college and did a tremendous job there. Yeah. So just the game of football, yeah, he can talk about that. But just the idea of what this show's about, he's just a tremendous example of it.
Yeah, and then Pete, when did you meet Pete Wellborn, who we're going to be talking
on this
about?
committee? I meet Pete. Pete played for Bill at Georgia Tech. Pete got he's scholarship, but he had an academic scholarship, wanted to be on the team, so on. Yep, he's on the team. And goes on, and all the things that he learned from Coach Curry, he says definitely applies to every day of his life as a successful lawyer in his law firm. So these are things maybe people should hear, the things you do in high school or college, the sports you play. They don't just stop there. That you learn so much that you can apply to life.
Yeah. And what I love about this, too, is these firsthand accounts of the history of a game that we love so much. I mean, just the fact that we're getting a chance to sit down and talk to Coach Bill Curry about being in the first Super Bowl and playing with these guys and playing for Vince Lombardi. These are firsthand accounts that you don't hear every day. Yeah. So he's just going to be... It's going to be so fun to hear these stories. He's a wealth of knowledge, such a character. It's really a fun episode today. So stick around.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten to know them because of this committee we're on, and just 2 really interesting people. And Bill, he's historical.
Yeah,
I mean, he really is.
Yeah, he is. So stick around. We're going to be right back with both those men here on The Object of the Game. Welcome back to the object of the game. And today we have NFL history with us as our guest. Dad, both of these men you call friends. I want
Right.
you to introduce who our guests are today.
Right. It really is an honor. I have the opportunity to be on a committee. We'll talk. We've talked before about that, but Bill Curry, who historically you'll see as the show goes on, is involved not certainly in college football and so on, but in the NFL as the NFL just started growing and growing, and the Super Bowl became what a fascinating experience. He definitely witnessed the early days and so on. And we have Pete Welburn, who played at Georgia Tech for Coach Curry, so we can get some stories there too. And Pete has gone on to become a very successful lawyer, and that's what I think we hope this show does show, that you play football and you learn a lot in football, and you go on and have people that take some things that they witnessed in football and have success with it. That's what we love to do.
The lessons that they learn on the field.
Yes, that's what we really want to work on.
Yeah.
So if we will, let's get started with because this is going to be interesting. A lot of fun things.
Right. I know I have a lot of questions, but first, just thank you for taking the time, both of you, Coach Curry, Pete. Thank you for sitting down with us. And I have to say, I was just really blown away by the history of Coach Curry here. If you don't mind, could you tell us about your early sports history? Like, what did you start out playing when you were a kid, and what was it like back then?
I had two goals in life. When I was 12 years old, I was short and chubby and not very talented. And I had already identified the person that I was going to marry. She would not speak to me for 6 years, but I had two goals, and one was to marry her. Her name was Carolyn Newton. It has been Carolyn Newton Curry for the last 62 years.
That's pretty good.
So that part, that worked.
It did.
But I had a goal to pitch for the New York Yankees, and that did not go as well. One thing kept me out of the majors in baseball: talent. So I actually went out for this sport that I detested. I hated football. If I could stand 60 feet, 6 inches from you and throw something at you, why would I want to run into you and risk injuring my little puffy body? So I was not a happy camper out there. And one day, the assistant coach, we only had 11 new players, and we had a legendary head coach, much like Coach Kyle. Didn't have the same record as Coach Kyle, but had a very good record, and he made things very, very tough for us. No water, tackling every snap, blocking every snap, and I just didn't like any of it. Yeah. And the assistant coach started putting us in positions, and there was only one position that fit my little body, and it was offensive center, which is the place I least wanted to play. So the worst thing that could have happened to short, fat Bill Curry happened that day, right? Wrong. A few years later, I learned to snap the ball to Billy Lothridge at Georgia Tech, who was a Heisman Trophy candidate, and then later to Roger Staubach and John Heward and Bob Timberlake and Craig Morton in the college all-star game. And the week after that, I learned to hike the ball to Bart Starr, and a few years later to John Unitas, and then on and on and on. And I had the privilege of being in the presence of the greatest leaders on the field in the history of our sport up until that time. Maybe some of the guys have matched them since then. I doubt it, because I'm biased toward especially Bart and John. But playing offensive center was a life-changing experience for me. The sport of football taught me everything I needed to be a success in life, and I wish I had done a better job of incorporating all the great lessons. But I was blessed to be forced out onto that field and have nobody to blame but myself.
Wow.
I do have to. He could have gone to a couple other colleges. He was a good high school football player. He did, especially your senior year. That's your book. which I'm going to keep flashing all day because I want people to read it. But you went to Georgia Tech for a very good reason. The young lady you married, right? That's from the book.
Yeah, my dad was a Georgia Bulldog, and
Yeah.
I got a hold of not a calendar, a map, and learned that Athens, Georgia was not the closest campus to Agnes Scott College. And guess who was going to be at Agnes Scott
There you
College?
go.
Carolyn Newton. And
Aw.
so I picked Georgia Tech, which was way out of my league academically. It was so hard. But once we got married while I was there, and she made sure I studied. So I actually got out. We don't say graduate; we say we got out.
I
Oh,
love
that's
it. I
that's
love
right.
it.
Really, yeah. Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
If you look at the really fine reputation of colleges, and I mean Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, and Stanford, and so I mean really. And Pete, you went to Georgia Tech. That's where Coach Curry was coaching, and you were coached by him, and you went to Georgia Tech.
Let me interrupt and tell you quickly that Pete was not only at Georgia Tech; he was a presidential scholar
Oh,
at
wow.
Georgia Tech. He came in. He was recruited by Stanford and the Ivy Leagues,
Right.
and came to Georgia Tech. I'll let him tell you that story.
Wow.
And I had sort of the exact mirror image of coach's love of sports as a kid. I was actually a really, really good baseball player. Got lots of individual accolades and awards. In football, the only individual thing I ever got was most improved in the 8th grade. But I loved and still do the game of football with all my heart and soul.
Yeah.
And I was raised on Tech. Then my dad went to Tech. We never missed a home game. I'm from Macon, about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. Never missed a home game until I started playing Major League Football myself. But then Bill Curry got the job at Georgia Tech, and that cemented it. I actually had an appointment to West Point. I still have my beautiful folder of the appointment, leather-bound thing, and offers, lots of baseball offers and academic offers at other places. I will say maybe my favorite Bill Curry story. I was sitting in March of my senior year at Central High School in Macon, sitting in my class. Only time this man has ever lied that I know of.
Wow.
The over the intercom system, they say, Pete Wellborn, please, and the whole school here says, Pete Wellborn, please report to the office and call head football coach Bill Curry at Georgia Tech.
Oh,
so I'm the big man on campus for the rest of the year, right there. So go to the office, and yes, I had been recruited, and yes, I was invited to the spring game and all that, but they would have had to have 800 offerees, recruits say no before they got to my name, and I knew that. But I had the academic scholarship, so it was fine. I had just gotten offered the academic scholarship from Tech. So I said, hello, this is Pete Wellborn. He said, Pete, this is Bill Curry. He said, as you know, we absolutely had an athletic scholarship with your name on it. But since you got offered an academic scholarship, you wouldn't mind taking that one instead.
Oh my God.
We could give your athletic scholarship to another deserving young man. And that made me feel so good. They did not, to this day, I know that there was not a football scholarship with my name on it, but he said that there was.
College recruiting, isn't that special? How the wheeling and dealing. You don't remember saying
Before, we're going to take a break in a minute here, but I just want to get context for everybody. What years are we talking about here? Coach Curry, what years were you in college? And then Pete, what years were you in college?
I was in college from 1960 through 65. I got so enthralled with chemistry, it took me a few extra semesters. So I didn't get out in 4 years. But then Pete came in the early 80s.
Okay. 82 through 85 were my 4 seasons, and I graduated a computer science degree in spring of 86.
Incredible.
Good friend of mine, Tim Hyland, went to Georgia Tech. He's from this area. He played linebacker and good. He is very successful in the Cleveland area and everything like that. He tells, Georgia Tech stories all the time. The Southeast Conference and everything. My God, it's the rite of passage in the Southeast Conference is to play football. There's no doubt about that. And here you are. You have to battle some of those teams, and we hear about Georgia and
I know.
Alabama and all those all the years. And
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's still so much history to talk about. I mean, you heard Coach Curry say Johnny Unitas is somebody that he played with. He has such big names that he has worked with, coached. We're going to hear some more really great stories, so make sure you stick with us. We'll be right back. You are watching The Object of the Game, and our guests today, you are in for a treat. We are talking to legendary Coach Bill Curry and Pete Wellborn, who played for him and has a lot of history with Georgia Tech football. We've been talking about that. But Coach Curry, I wanted to get to, since we just got through, like I was saying in the commercial break, all the glitz and glam of the Super Bowl. You had experience with some of the earliest Super Bowls and some of the earlier days of the NFL. I know that everybody's going to want to hear the history, but Dad, you even brought up that it was kind of different how you got drafted.
right, just in reading your book, and again, the title of the book, 10 Men You Meet in the Huddle, very, very good read, very fun. But while I was reading that, this is so different nowadays because you were a junior and you got drafted in the,
The 20th round.
20th round.
Wow.
It's 7 rounds now. So everybody put that in perspective. The 20th round as a future choice. Okay, now you had to, while we were off there, you did have a chance to explain. Could you explain what that really meant back then?
What I thought, my brother-in-law called me at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hello, Green Bay Packer," and I hung up on him because the league was having a draft, but I didn't even know that the NFL had a draft. I was that clueless. And he called me back and he said, "You better get a newspaper. The Green Bay Packers have drafted you in the 20th round." I said, "The 20th? They got that many rounds? Good grief!" Well, sure enough, he was correct. And I was a 212-pound offensive center on an average Georgia Tech team. We were 7-3, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand why Vince Lombardi had drafted me. And Pat Pepler, his personnel man, loves to tell this story publicly. That late in the evening of the draft, Lombardi turned to Pat Pepler and said, "Pepler, it's 2 a.m. We've drafted 19 players. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. Do something humorous with the 20th selection." And he went down. So that's how I got drafted by the Green Bay Packers.
That is
Wow.
incredible. I went to Fordham University, so Vince Lombardi is a big name, and I was around a lot of, Lombardi history.
The 7 blocks of granite.
7 blocks of granite.
Oh, yeah.
Fordham University.
Mhm.
He was one of them.
What was it like?
Right.
What was he like in person?
He was indomitable. You could not be in his presence without feeling the charisma and the power. If you crossed him in any way, you didn't have to be late. You just had to be later than 15 minutes before the meeting. If you were 5 minutes early, you were 10 minutes late. And you could do the interpolation for that pretty easily. That meant be seated 5 minutes before the meetings. And his rages were phenomenal. They were terrifying. And at first I was afraid he was going to kill me. And then I was afraid he was going to pass out when he would go into those rages. Your religion, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. That's what you'll think of while you're here. Those priorities will be all you think of. Well, he was very serious about that. And plus he had great players, and plus he had his greatest asset. And he does not get credit for this, but he had many assets as a leader. First of all, real leaders take responsibility for everything. Mm-hmm. Vince Lombardi taught us that, and he made us learn that. You look around now at the people that pose as leaders, they're not really leaders at all. What he taught us, though, when we came under his jurisdiction, was that we were going to be responsible for our leadership, and we were going to blame nobody else, and we were going to look down our nose at nobody else. No racism, Other teams in the league at the time signed no African American players and bragged about it. Coach Lombardi had 11 African American players when I arrived at Green Bay, and it was a 40-man roster. And he would have had 40 African American players because he didn't care what color your skin was, and he wouldn't tolerate racism or sexism or any other kind of prejudice. That was his greatest strong suit, and the team knew that. And here I was, a white boy from College Park, Georgia. I had never been in a huddle with an African American person. Wow. And the great African American leaders on that team, especially Willie Davis, took me aside, loved me, embraced me, and changed my life. And oh, by the way, nobody could beat us. They won 5 world championships in 7 years. That will never happen again.
Oh my gosh. No.
Your book, again, 10 Men You Meet in the Huddle, talks certainly about Willie Davis and Vince Lombardi and so on. And the interesting thing, the way you tell it, it's this sincere sort of interesting, innocent perspective of a guy who's just, hey, I made it. Here I am. I'm in, first few years, you're not starting. You're on the special teams. You're helping out every way you can. And here's Bart Starr and Willie Davis really taking you aside and working with you. What an experience that was. That was an incredible part of your book.
It was an incredible life-changing experience, and it forged every detail of what I tried to do with young people to this day. What I still try to do when I have the privilege of working with, and everybody's younger than me now, so everybody's my youth group.
Pete, I want to bring you into the conversation too, because then you had the opportunity to play for Coach Curry, and he just talked about all the leadership that he learned from Vince Lombardi. Did you see that leadership come through as a player for Coach Curry?
I'm going to guess, Pete, that Bill was not a Vince Lombardi type of guy. You know, his own personality doesn't show me Vince Lombardi.
All the good aspects.
Type of thing.
I think very much his own man, but really embodied all the most wonderful traits of Coach Lombardi and Coach Shula and Coach Dodd and all the other greats and his dad, every great person that helped mold him into who he is today. And I'll say, I am not the typical person to have been shaped or molded by Bill Curry. I had the happiest childhood in history. I had the best mom and dad and sister and same household as my uncle and my grandmother and the dog. Just an all-American upbringing. You know, I wasn't impoverished or from the inner city. I didn't come from a broken home. I didn't really need anybody. And yet when I got to Georgia Tech, Bill Curry changed my life because that's what he does. He changes lives. And I'd say the most valuable lesson of the many, many ones that I learned from him is every one of us is a sculptor of every person that we come in contact with. And that's whether it's a player or a family member that you see hours and hours every day, or whether it's the checkout girl at the grocery store that you see one time for 30 seconds. But who they are as a person and who they become, you help mold that by every interaction. And that's a great responsibility. And in my mind, you know, people have always wanted to live forever. I've told Coach, he will literally live forever because there's a lot of Bill Curry in me. And with all the youth coaching that I've done, and my daughter from the time she was 3 and all the sports and boys basketball and soccer and softball, coaching her high school softball team in my spare time, which was 3 months a year, 40 hours a week. There's a lot of Bill Curry in every kid that I've ever coached because I do my best to impart those same wonderful lessons and traits that Coach helped instill in me. And so 5 generations, 10 generations from now, there's going to be a little Bill Curry in every person, at least that I came in contact with.
Yeah. You know, Maureen, that's why we've talked about how, you know, coaching, Bill, it's a vocation. I mean, you love the game, you know, and the career part, but it's a vocation. And what Pete is beautifully with the metaphors that you use, that describes the vocation very nicely. It's a life worth living. And when you talk about generations being affected by it, you know, because you helped train a number of guys that became fathers that have sons and daughters, and it just moves along. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Um, should we keep going? Should we take a break?
We're going to take, okay.
We're going to take a break. I love these stories. And then we didn't even get to the stories about the Super Bowl
Right.
when tickets were $12.
Yes.
That's to me, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, the thousands of dollars people pay now. So we're going to talk to Coach Curry about his experience in those very early Super Bowls when we come back. Welcome back to the Object of the Game here on Big Play Networks. We are with a legend today. We are with the legendary Bill Curry and Pete Wellborn, who we're talking about the history that especially Coach Curry has seen. And I know we've been talking about it as we've gone throughout this episode, but we want to get to the moment where we're talking about the very first Super Bowl. I mean, most of us have watched very recently, within the past couple of weeks, what the Super Bowl has become. But Coach Curry, you were in the first Super Bowl. Can you describe what that was like? What was that experience like?
Well, we didn't know what our opponent would be like. And we heard all kinds of erroneous reports about what the Kansas City Chiefs could or could not do. But when we took the field, we realized as soon as we looked at their squad, and we saw Buck Buchanan and Bobby Lee Bell and some of those stallions that they had on offense. I mean, they were really, really good. And it was sobering. And the game was very close through halftime. I left the game in the second quarter with an ankle injury. It was the only game and I had become the starter because of an injury to Ken Bowman, who was the starting center. And I had started every single game and had not missed a play the entire year. I think that was 16 games, but I had to leave that game, and it just made me sick. And to this day, it's just a shame. But Ken Bowman was ready, and he went in and did a great job. And then the second half, our team began to blitz on defense, and they had a tough time picking up somebody like Dave Robinson and Willie Davis coming off the edge. And that's two Hall of Famers on one side of our defense. And then we had corners and safeties that were also future Hall of Famers, Willie Wood, Herb Adderley. Those guys were just such phenomenal players that we pulled away and won the game handily. But the Chiefs would come back and teach the Vikings a lesson in a couple of years when they trounced them in the Super Bowl IV, I think it was. So that was a really good team. That's all of that to say we were very surprised at how good they were and how they challenged us.
Dad, say what you were just saying in the break too about as a spectator. I mean, you weren't there live, but like the Super Bowl, nobody knew what it was going to be.
Those first couple years, the NFL championship game. Come on, that was a championship. I mean, we're in Cleveland, okay? So when the Cleveland Browns upset the Baltimore Colts years ago before the Super Bowl, that was just, they still talk about it here, Whenever we're going to get to the Super Bowl, I don't know. But they still talk about that, right? But here's this Super Bowl, and it was sort of, in a way, I think the mentality of a lot of people is that's kind of anticlimactic. I mean, the NFL championship, that's the big game. Here's this other kind of, okay, have fun game. And like what you're just saying, hey, wait a minute, this is professional football, and these guys are good. This is a battle, and I think, the first couple, I don't think America really realized, until, and I got to mention Joe Namath. I'm sorry, but Joe Namath showed up, and needless to say, you were with the Baltimore Colts. Then we're going to get to that, and it wasn't Colts' best day. Let's face it, and things happen, and that kind of exploded. Suddenly, I as I'm looking back at it, now it's the AFL and the NFL this thing's going to come together, and it's pro football. And that's what we're seeing.
It really did do that. And Joe Namath had crushed us when he was at Alabama and I was at Georgia Tech. He had beaten us with deep throws, and I was not supposed to like him, but we ended up in the Senior Bowl together. And the first thing that happens, as Coach knows, is center quarterback exchange.
Right.
So Joe and I run off to the side of the field and we work on center quarterback exchange. And after 15 minutes, we were best friends, and we're still best friends
Oh,
to
that's
this
great.
very day. I had to invite him to dinner because my wife wouldn't speak to him.
Oh,
And
wow.
when he left our home, she said, "Oh my gosh, I was wrong about him. He's wonderful." So
Aw.
let me get that out of the way. Joe's a
Good.
wonderful guy and he's a
Yeah.
friend of mine, but he ruined our lives.
Okay. Oh, that
He and his offensive line,
yeah.
and the fact that we turned the ball over
Right.
so many
Right.
times. We were 15-1, and Coach, this is going to hurt you a little bit, but the only team that beat us was Cleveland
Oh.
that year.
Mhm.
And we had just gone to Cleveland for the NFL championship game
Yeah.
and beat the Browns 34-0.
Right.
Wow.
That I remember
Now,
that
all we
early.
had to
Yeah.
do, is go beat the Jets, and we would be known as the greatest team of all time. We'd be 16-1, right?
Mhm.
Well, we didn't finish the job.
Right.
And it is, as a competitor, that, as you know, that hurt never goes away.
Right. Right. Yes, that was certainly anybody in Cleveland was thinking, oh, why even watch? Oh man, this is there's no way the Jets have a chance.
Yeah.
Well, it's football, right?
Yep.
That the design of the ball, it bounces crazy, and a few turnovers. I don't care. Somebody's picked to win, even 2 turnovers, and now you've just balanced out. Maybe
Oh,
they're
yeah.
the better team.
You
but
know that. You know that better than most people. Of course, you hadn't lost many.
Well, you learn a lot from the
Yeah,
ones you lose. Okay, so we'll go on.
but I would love to have your record, and so would anybody else. It's wonderful.
Oh man,
So then how did you get into coaching?
yeah.
The worst possible route to coaching is to play in the NFL for a long time. I played 10 years and I learned one thing: how to survive as an offensive center. If I tried to say something in a team meeting, the guys would say, "Shut up, Curry. Your job is to hike the ball and be run over slowly. Just remember that. That's your job. Don't worry about anything else." And basically, that was true. So here I was, selected as the head coach at my alma mater, proud, wonderful school, great football tradition. And the bad thing about playing in the league a long time, especially if you play for people like Lombardi and Shula, you think you know a lot of football. You don't know anything about staff organization. You don't know anything about recruiting. You don't know anything about facilities management. You don't know anything about alumni relations. You have all of that learning to do. So I spent my time on the job training the first 5 years I was a head coach at Georgia Tech. And it was one of the hardest times of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I got into it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought there was maybe one right after finished playing. I think you had like one season in the NFL, with Bart Starr. Wasn't that it? Or am
No,
I wrong?
I coached Bart's offensive line 3 years.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Bart promised me, you know how these guys are, Coach, that promise you, if I ever get a big job, I'm going to hire you. And then you never hear from them
Yeah.
the rest of your life. Well, Bart got a big job and he hired me immediately.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of human being he was.
Yeah.
He was one of the great human beings I've ever known. One of the top 2 or 3 human beings I've ever known in my life.
Yeah, it's his reputation. His reputation.
Another one
was just-
sitting to my left right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
People who give and give and give of themselves, expecting nothing in return. And you have to respond to that as a leader. So I'm being long-winded here, but I worked 3 years for Bart. Actually 4 if you count 1 year that I spent scouting.
Oh my. Okay. And then just so many coaches you hear, the college guys, because I bump into all the time, and they want to move up the ladder, right? Their career, move up the ladder. And actually, I was told today, a good friend of mine, we had on the show,
Yeah. A couple weeks ago.
Scott Leffler, who quarterback at Michigan, and he was the head coach at Bowling Green University as of, 4 hours ago. How's that? And how he is the core. I walk in here today, and Pat tells me he was just hired as the quarterback coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, that moving up the ladder, it's interesting. You did pros, I think, first, and then you went to college. What you just wanted to come back to college? What? I'm interested in. You were in the pros, and I've been fortunate. I've coached young men that are coaching in the NFL. John Gannon, at Arizona, I coached him in high school, and Dave Ragone and Tom Arthur, quarterback coaches. And once you make it in the league, it seems like that's where you stay. But college, and it's interesting that you go there.
Well, you're exactly right, and it was so tempting. But I was married to this Southern girl. We had 2 beautiful children, and I'll never forget the Easter morning. She had to put overcoats on them to go to Sunday school on Easter. And we had the Easter egg hunt in the living room because we couldn't go outside. It was 10 degrees. She sat me down. She said, "I need to talk to you. Listen, I love you. I love you. I'm going to stay married to you. I'm not going to live here very long."
Career changes. There we are.
Oh
that had a lot to do with it. Dr. Carolyn Newton Curry had a lot to do with it, my beautiful wife.
Wow.
And we had an opportunity to go home. It was Atlanta.
Right.
If it had been some other school, I don't think I would have done it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Incredible.
That's really.
And
Thank
Georgia
you for
Tech
sharing
was
that.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech football was in real trouble.
Oh.
We want to get to the Georgia Tech days.
we
We got
do.
to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have more of these wonderful and incredible stories. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the object of the game. Our guest today, legendary coach Bill Curry and Pete Wellborn, who played for him. And then we've been talking about how you had the academic scholarship to Georgia Tech. And at the very beginning of this episode, you talked about how the lessons you learned while playing football have led to your success today. And that's something that we hope that this show gets across to parents who have kids who are playing sports and to kids who are old enough to watch and listen and maybe they're playing sports. Talk to us about why did you say that? Why do you see football as what led to some of your success and some of those lessons that you learned?
I think football is the most wonderful medium or conduit with the right leader to teach these lessons and to mold young men, and now with flag football, young women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's people like Coach Kyle. And we were talking about books, by the way. Coach Curry and I are in the middle of The Object of the Game, loving it. I didn't think I'd ever hear the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner quoted in a book about football, but it's a point I've made many, many times, the difference in water consumption during practice. That was the biggest shock to me when I got to Tech, was that we got to go over to the Octopus and drink water whenever we wanted to, instead of having one Dixie cup halfway through practice.
Yeah.
But
we all remember that, right? That experience. Oh my God. And a jersey that lasted you the whole year, so it was nice and thick and heavy. That was brutal.
That's another one of the many, many lessons that Coach taught me that I try to impart, and I think it's been a huge part of why I've, however good a lawyer I am, and whether it's true or not, I think I'm a better coach. And I truly think the most important thing I do and have done in my life is coaching and teaching and mentoring young people. And I tell people with tongue only half in cheek, because it really is true, I think I had the least ability and the most love of the game of anybody who ever played college football. And under the wrong leader, that could have been a recipe for disaster. I could have felt like I was, a nothing. I wasn't any good. I was, not a real part of the team. I was scout team quarterback for 4 years. Even when I switched to linebacker, they still had me run scout team quarterback because I was good at it. Right. Coach made me feel like I was the most important person on the team. He made every person understand that they had to do their role. And if one person, if the scout team quarterback didn't do his role, I didn't do my role, if the starting quarterback didn't do his role, if everybody didn't do their role, whatever it was, we would not be successful. And that's a lesson that's lost on so many people. People want to be the star of the team. People want to be the star of the company, but it takes everybody to be successful. And that's something I'll never forget. That's something I tried to put into play here at my law firm. That's something I try to put into play with every kid that I coach. And it's just an invaluable, wonderful lesson from this great man.
I hope there are a lot of young men playing football watch this and listen to what you just said. Because, let me just second what you just were talking about. We've had players go to the NFL and major college, all this sort of stuff. But come on, most of them, 98% of them, come on, they played high school. They had this amazing. And what did they learn? The guy who ran the scout squad, kids that said, hey, I'm doing this for the team. I'm not the starter. My name's never going to get in the paper. But I'm going to make this team better. I want this team to be better. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to run the plays against our first team defense, or I'm going to be the defensive guys that are trying to stop those guys. So many of them, Pete, have gone on to be CEOs of companies, major successes, because what did they learn very early? They threw their ego in the back seat and said, no, I'm doing this for the team. And that, what you're talking about, is what kids should learn. I mean, the star, he had his name in the paper, but so many guys learned that self-sacrifice for the others, and that goes a long way in this world we live in. And I hope people listen to this one and listen to what you just said.
Yeah. We have a segment. We always love to have our guests tell a story. And I know that between the two of you, you probably have a million. But as we were talking about in the break, we want to kind of circle back to your relationship with Don Shula, because this is a Northeast Ohio podcast here.
We got to hear the story about Don Shula. It's Northeast Ohio.
Right. So do you have a good story about Don?
Don Shula saved my career, and I owe everything football-wise, everything that happened after my third year, to Don Shula. Great head coaches find a way to reach you through the means that are unique to you. And I hope you can gather from this story how he reached me at the most critical moment in the life of Carolyn and me and our daughter, who was born while I was in my first training camp with the Baltimore Colts. I was placed on the expansion list and claimed by the New Orleans Saints, which I thought was a fate worse than death. I blame Coach Lombardi, but it was not his fault at all. It was my fault. I couldn't see that. I was too immature, and I had to go apologize to him later. But I did not want to go to the expansion team. And I got this strange phone call from some guy claiming to be Don Shula. And at first I thought it was one of my buddies messing around with me. So I almost said something smart. I almost wised off. But then I decided, well, maybe I better play it straight. So I said, okay, Coach Shula, yes, I'm glad to hear from you. It was indeed Don Shula. He said, Bill, I'm calling you because we're trying to make a trade. And I know you've been starting the last year, but we like the way you play special teams. And Coach Shula was the first head coach I'm aware of in the NFL that really emphasized special teams. He won a lot of games with special teams, and he put hours and hours into it. And Coach Dodd had taught us all at Georgia Tech how to play every special team. So I could long snap, I could cover kickoffs, I could block for kickoffs. So he noticed all that stuff, and I hadn't even thought about it. But he said, I'm calling because I want to ask you, if I trade for you and you come to Baltimore and you're only playing special teams, are you going to be happy with that? Would you accept that? And I said, Coach, this was my answer. I actually said this, Coach, I would walk to Baltimore to play for you. So we made the deal. We're playing our first game on national TV. Carolyn is going to bring our 5-week-old baby girl, Kristen, that very same week, because now I have made the team. And we have an 80-yard punt return early in the game, and I clipped the guy right in front of our bench. And Shula runs on the field, grabs my shoulder pads, shakes me like a rag doll, and screams some very enriching profanity in my face. Lombardi would have been proud of him. And so since he came on the field over the white lines where we're supposed to be violent, I screamed back at him with the same verbiage. I'm ashamed of that, but I did. So we're watching film Tuesday with the assistant coach, and he said, Curry, is that a clip? I said, well, it might be. He said, well, let me offer you a suggestion. The next time you decide to dog cuss the head coach on national television, you make dang sure it's not a clip. Do you understand? And I said, I think I got it. And I think, oh Lord, Carolyn's flying in with our baby girl tomorrow, and I'm not going to have a job. We're going to pack up and drive our car back to Atlanta. So I went and found Shula and asked if I could see him. He took me in the equipment room, and I just said, Coach, I'm so sorry. I was completely out of line. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I'm so sorry that I did that, and it will never happen again. I promise you. You know what he did? He smiled. And this is what he said. I kind of like that. Just don't clip the guy.
Yeah.
I said, I got it, Coach. Yeah. And I played my heart out for Don Shula we got to be together 3 years only, but yeah. I would have gone to wherever he went just to play for him.
Right. Well, he does leave Baltimore and he goes to the Dolphins, and let's face it, history shows he's still, I think, what people would say, the best coach that was in the NFL. I mean,
he's got the best record of any coach in the history of the National Football League.
Yeah. He got it done. He was a man that certainly got it done.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
He sure did.
Wow.
Did you give these men the vocabulary word, the themes?
I did.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When
Right.
we come back, what we always like to ask our guests is when you take a look at, so these are just suggestive words, but like when you take a look at that, like what is it that you take away from your time in sports that you think impacted your life? So we're going to play, vocab word, and then we have a quote.
Oh, yes.
All right. We have a literature quote just picked for you from the English teacher here. And that's all when we come back. Welcome back. You are watching The Object of the Game. We have legendary coach Bill Curry with us, Pete Wellborn, who played for him and now a successful attorney. We are now going into the vocab word section of our episode here, but Dad, before we do, you wanted to read a section of their book?
Yeah, I do. Again, this will be the third time, but I really suggest 10 men you meet in the huddle. Okay, this is the 10th anniversary of it, and reading through this book, I couldn't put it down. Just very insightful. But Coach Curry, if I may read something that really hits home to me, and I'll be honest, to my daughter. I'll explain that in a moment. How's that? Okay. And it's towards the end of the book, and it says this: when a team really comes together, it functions beyond the apparent sum of its component parts, and everyone learns unselfishness. When a team becomes great, it is because the people in the huddle refused to let each other down. When that develops, as it does each year in one place or another, at all levels, the fancy word of synergism. Call it what you will, all competitors love it and will sacrifice virtually anything to be part of it. We go beyond ourselves because we love our teammates too much to let them down. And I will share a story to you. Her grandfather, your mom's dad, World War II, was the navigator in a B-17 bomber. He flew 26, 27 missions in Europe. He was the lead navigator on the first daytime bombing of Berlin. They expected 50% casualties that day, and he was the lead navigator. So the whole formation was based on my father-in-law's navigation. And he would hesitantly tell some stories, but this conversation I had is so right from what we just read. I had the courage one day to go, Dad, weren't you scared? And his answer, I'll remember the rest of my life, and pardon me if I get choked up because I did, but he simply said this: I was frightened out of my mind, but I looked to my left on that plane, and I looked to my right on that plane, and I would not let these other guys down. Now, your words right there is about the men in the huddle, and that man's words were about a B-17 trying to save the world. And notice how there's a common theme there that is magnificent, magnificent. So thank you for your words, Coach, because that brings back a wonderful memory for me.
Yeah, great excerpt of that book.
Yeah.
Our great sport gave those words to me, and we were not in a real war like your father-in-law. God bless him for that. I mean, we owe those guys our country, that's all.
Yes, we do.
But I've been in a lot of football games in which, in the last 2 minutes, I don't care how tough you are, and Coach, you understand this, there comes a moment when you really want to quit. And in our business, if you play my position, you don't have to leave the field to quit. All you got to do is turn your shoulders ever so slightly. Let Joe Green run back and do what he does to the quarterback. And then you can go home, you can go suck on the oxygen. And so maybe you decide, I just can't do this anymore. I've played 23 games in a row. I haven't missed a play. We've got 1 minute and 40 seconds. We need a touchdown to win. I can't block this guy anymore. And then this little voice comes from deep inside and it says, oh, yes, you can. You look at your brother on the left and the right, and don't you dare let him down. It's the same words. Don't you dare. You move your feet, you keep your head up, you keep your pad square, you protect your quarterback. Don't you dare let them touch him. And the teams that develop that together are almost impossible to beat.
Amen.
Coach already did this.
Yeah. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
So I feel like, I don't know. I mean, do we need to get into a word?
Go with a vocabulary.
Let's go with a word.
I'm an English teacher. I have to have vocabulary or something.
Right. As you look at that list, I mean, I feel like this whole conversation has been profound anyway. But when you take a look at that list, is there any word that jumps out to you that the game of football has taught you about life or playing sports, or what you were just saying about not letting your team down?
I'll let Pete go on first on that.
The one that jumps out to me is perseverance, and especially perseverance in the face of adversity. Because especially if you're not very talented, you're going to have a lot of adversity in this game that we love. I'd never played a defense in my whole life until I got stuck in, I think as a joke, into a scrimmage. And I mean, literally, I got stuck in it. I knocked the toughest guy on the team out of practice, sustained a horrible concussion, and don't remember the practice to this day. But I knocked Pat Swilling out of practice. They stuck me in his place as a joke, said, you knocked him out, you take his place. Never played a defense. And because I was just operating on instinct and not thinking, I think that's why I had my best 20 minutes ever on a football field. But then they said, well, maybe you should, you're not that great of a quarterback. Maybe you should switch to linebacker. And there was so much adversity, and I had so much to learn. And I went from being a big, slow quarterback to a small, slow linebacker. And there were so many times I wanted to give up. But I love the game, and I love Coach Curry, and I love the guys next to me. And I understood that I didn't have to be a star to make a contribution. And that perseverance, and that's one of the main things I tried to instill in my daughter is that toughness. You know, one of the sayings, tough times don't last, tough people do.
Right. Right.
And that's so true. And so I think that's one of the absolute main lessons that I learned from the game of football was to be tough in the face of adversity.
It's important in the game, and life deals that way too. At Coach Curry, you pick something out?
Well, I could, you and I could pick any one of these.
Yeah, I know.
and it would work. I mean, we can sit here and think of guys, and in the case of more and more women are involved now in the administrative part of our sport, and with flag football coming along, they'll be involved as players. But I can think of people who were representative of every single one of these characteristics. But I'll pick the one again because it's talked about so much, and it is discipline. Teams that have self-discipline are almost impossible to beat in the fourth quarter. They don't have to be disciplined by the coach. The coach can't do a thing except send in a play. That's all we can do. And coach, you know that better than I do. But when the team is disciplined, when they have gotten the message, and when all 11 of them share that common thread of, I'm not letting my teammate down. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to get this job done. When they have that attitude, then they win the championship, or at least they extend themselves beyond the apparent ability on the team, which refers to something you read out of the book there. That's it, and it's such a great experience to be a part of that. And when you've been a part of that kind of team, you never forget those guys.
Yeah.
Maureen and Coach Kyle, can I take 30 seconds to give a part B to my answer, because I saw one other word,
All right.
and it's going to kill me if I don't talk about it with this
good.
man here.
Yeah.
The word is tolerance. And
good.
I'll say that because of what I've learned from Coach Curry, tolerance is not my favorite word in the English language, because as I've learned from Coach, when is the last time that you started a new job, or you went to a new team, or you went to introduce yourself to the people that you were coaching or the parents of those kids, and you thought to yourself, I hope they tolerate me? That's not what you think to yourself. I hope they love me. And so, tolerance is not enough. You have to love your teammates and love your coaches. And when that happens, it's magical. And I'll tell you, I over the many, many years, I had 4 different head coaches my last 3 years of high school. 2 of them were fantastic. 2 of them were not. This man is fantastic. And what I learned is that there's nothing more special in the world than creating an environment where it really is an atmosphere of love. And that's love that doesn't matter whether you're black or white, whether you're Christian or Jewish or country or city or east or west. Coach tells it much more, articulately and beautifully than I can when he talks about the miracle of the huddle. But the miracle of the huddle is love.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a Shakespeare quote.
Okay,
I taught Shakespeare for a number of years.
with a quote.
And
Yes.
she's gotten me into this. I have to find a Shakespeare quote that somehow fits. All right. So I'm going to go to the play Henry V, which is a famous history play, and whatever. It just, and everybody remembers the famous speech, that we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. But this is 2 scenes before it, and it's poor Henry. It's the night before the battle. They are totally outnumbered. They should get massacred, all that. And it's a soliloquy. He's walking around, and he's realizing the challenge of leadership and the ponderous atmosphere that you are when you're a leader. And he says this, and as he's walking around, what infinite heart's ease must kings neglect that private men enjoy. He couldn't sleep that night. when you're the leader, Bill, it's hard to sleep the night before a game. Your players get great rest right there, and the head coach is like, "What if they do this? Did I go over this enough? Do I have this ready?" And that's what he was talking about there. He had to turn to these soldiers and fight in a famous battle, which they won and all this sort of thing. But he couldn't sleep that night because he's putting these guys into a situation they're outnumbered 5-1, and you know what's going to happen. But it's interesting how he talks about that that sort of burden of leadership. People don't realize until they're a leader how, you know what, it takes a lot out of you. It really does. And you witnessed that for years. Okay, Coach?
So did you, and thank you. What a great thing. I'm going to rush to my English teacher daughter and read
All
that.
right.
And she'll be impressed. She'll be so impressed with you.
All right. That's Act 4, Scene 1. So you don't have to page through the whole book.
I got it.
Yeah.
Don't have to put through the whole play. It's a great play.
Yeah.
Talk about leadership.
Yeah. Well, Bill, Pete, I mean, I just can't even express how great it has been talking with you and getting these stories and getting your perspective on what football has meant to you and the history that you've seen, Coach Curry. Just incredible. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today on the object of the game.
Really do. Next Thursday, I'm ready. Well, Pete, let's go. We're gonna jump in on your podcast and continue this on. This will be fun.
We can't wait, and thank you so much for having us.
Oh,
yeah,
real
this
pleasure.
was wonderful. Thank you so much. And you never. I'm 82 years old, and I still get goosebumps when I get to be in the presence of a really great football coach. And Coach Kyle, having you invite us on to this show is such an honor and a privilege. And for you to read my book just thrills my soul.
Yeah. Folks, I'm going to put it right here. Please look into it if you liked any of these stories, and you had to have. This book's a great read. Yeah. Okay? All right.
Guys,
thank you guys.
So much. It was wonderful.
We'll talk next Thursday.
Thank y'all so much.
They were so great. Thank you for watching The Object of the Game here on the Big Play Sports Network. Remember, you can watch all of these episodes on the Big Play Sports Network on YouTube, and then also download the free app. That's where you're going to see all of the Big Play Sports Network shows. We'll see you right back here next week.